This video is brought to you by Brilliant. For the last few years, Sinn Féin has been treated as something of a government in waiting in the Republic of Ireland. The Irish Republican Party achieved the historic result at the last election in 2020, rupturing the usual two-party system by winning the most votes. And while that didn't take Sinn Féin into the government, it did become the largest opposition party, and it has held a polling lead since the end of 2020. But Sinn Féin's fortunes seem to have shifted, with it declining in the polls and posting disappointing results at both the local and European elections earlier in June. So, in this video, we're going to explain Sinn Féin's recent rise and fall, and what it means for the party going forward.
Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos.
To start with some quick background, the origins of Sinn Féin date back to the early 1900s, when it was founded as an organisation opposed to British rule in Ireland and played a key role in securing Irish independence, though it's worth noting that the modern party is actually a result of several splits and divisions, too many to go into, over the past century or so. You've probably heard of Sinn Féin being described as the former public wing of the IRA, for its association with the Republican group that during the Troubles waged the violent campaign to end British rule of Northern Ireland and unite Ireland as a single independent entity. The Irish Republican dual strategy, balancing the armed campaign with electoral politics, gradually shifted in favour of the latter through the 80s and 90s under Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams, with the IRA eventually ending its campaign following the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, which saw Sinn Féin sign up to exclusively peaceful and democratic means of resolving differences. Anyway, in the Republic, Sinn Féin never had more than a handful of seats in Ireland's lower house of Parliament, until the 2011 election, at which it won 14 seats, growing to 23 in 2016, and eventually in 2020, winning the impressive 37 seats we mentioned in the intro to this video. There are a few reasons behind Sinn Féin's rise and success in 2020, and their polling success that continued beyond this. Firstly, Ireland was hit particularly hard by the 2008 global financial crisis, which, as journalist Naomi O'Leary wrote, created the conditions for Sinn Féin to move away from its image as a single-issue party on Irish unity. It positioned itself as an anti-austerity party and boosted its progressive credentials by campaigning in favour of legalising same-sex marriage and abortion in referendums in 2015 and 2018. It grew increasingly popular by offering a left-wing alternative to the two mainstream centre-to-centre-right parties that have dominated Irish politics for a century or so. By putting housing front and centre of its platform, promising the largest public housing programme in the history of the state, Sinn Féin surged thanks in large part to younger voters frustrated at the country's acute housing crisis. The party also benefited from a change in leadership in 2018, when longtime leader Gerry Adams was succeeded by Mary Lou MacDonald, providing Sinn Féin with a new generation of leadership and putting greater distance between it and its historic links to the IRA. So after their strong showing at the 2020 election, things continued going well for Sinn Féin, as the party clearly used its position as the official opposition effectively, and by the summer of 2022, it hit a high of 36% in the polls. But as you can see from the graph, the party's support has fallen since then, particularly sharply from around October 2023 onwards, and the recent Irish local and European Parliament elections confirmed Sinn Féin's struggles. In the locals, while the party did increase its first preference vote share to just under 12%, it came in third place and fell far below the polling highs it had recorded since the last local elections were held. At the European elections, Sinn Féin also came third, recorded a similar percentage and only picked up just one extra seat, having hoped to gain 4. So, what is behind the drop in support for Sinn Féin? Well, at the recent elections, there were some strategic and campaign-related errors. For example, it may have stretched itself too thin by fielding too many candidates, and perhaps over-relied on a strategy centred on party leader Mary Lou MacDonald. The party also backed the losing side in 2 constitutional referendums back in March. But more important is immigration. Sinn Féin has suffered as immigration has become an increasingly central issue in Irish political debate. We actually made a video some months ago on Ireland's shifting position on migration, but to provide some numbers, more than 100,000 Ukrainian refugees have arrived in Ireland since 2022. And separately last year, there were some 13,000 asylum applications in Ireland, and a 5-fold increase on 2019 levels. The way this interacts with things like the pre-existing housing crisis and strained public services, coupled with high-profile incidents like the stabbing that sparked anti-migrant riots in Dublin last year, has sent immigration to the top of the political agenda. Polling shows that immigration dethroned housing as the issue most paid attention to by citizens in January, February, and again in May, the month before the local and European elections. Now, the immigration debate has obviously posed a challenge for the parties in the governing coalition, but for Sinn Féin it's been particularly difficult, as it's left the party, which previously had a relatively undeveloped position on migration and asylum, struggling to find a position that pleases the different parts of its base, which includes the more migrant-friendly young progressives who have bolstered the party in recent years, and its traditional working-class voters who favour more restrictive immigration and asylum policies. In fact, polling suggests that Sinn Féin's base is actually the most hostile to immigration of each party's grassroots, meaning the party's leadership has been somewhat out of step with its base. As such, anti-immigration voices have managed to seize the opposition narrative, and a considerable number of voters shifted from Sinn Féin to Ireland's already sizable raft of independent politicians and candidates, among whom are a number of new figures taking a hard line on immigration. It's not just independents benefiting from Sinn Féin's woes either. The governing coalition performed better than expected at the recent elections, with Fine Gael in particular appearing to have had a fresh injection of energy thanks to new party leader and Taoiseach Simon Harris, who took over in April following Leo Varadkar's resignation. To address its faltering position, Sinn Féin will need, as Mary Lou MacDonald has pledged, to regroup and reassess, and even before the recent elections the party had begun to harden its immigration stance. Now, whether this pays off and exactly how well Sinn Féin manages to keep its base together remains to be seen. But at this point, it looks like Sinn Féin's hopes of using the next election, due by March 2025, to break through into government are pretty unlikely, especially if the government seizes on Sinn Féin's weakness and calls an early election for the autumn.
Looking around the political stage, there's a good number of people who are probably eyeing up new jobs at the moment, so it might be a good time for Rishi & Co to grab a subscription to Brilliant. That's because Brilliant is the platform where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data analysis, programming, and AI, all of which are important skills whether you're currently in the jobs market or just looking to learn new things. As existing users will already know, Brilliant is a uniquely effective learning platform. Their first principles approach helps you build understanding from the ground up. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. Plus, if you are looking for a new job, say you're eyeing up a move to California to get into tech, Brilliant's growing number of programming courses are a great way to build foundations and learn real-world applications. Their courses help you learn essential coding elements, from loops and variables to nesting and conditionals, as well as developing your mind to think like a programmer, building a strong foundation in writing robust programs. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, click on the link in the description. Plus, when you do subscribe, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.